And so I pray we sing it with that heart.
Lord God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for being there. Father, we live in a society, Father, that's awfully confused about who you are, and Lord, why we're here and what it's about. And so I pray, Father, that as we honor you today, and Father, we honor that precious gift of moms today, I just pray your word and your spirit will speak to each of us. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Joseph, if you remember, was the child of Jacob. He had been in prison, all kinds of stuff, and he wound up number 2 in command over all of Egypt. And when he got there, they were fixing to go through 7 good years where they were not tires, but good years where they're going to grow good crops. And then 7 bad years where everyone is going to be in pretty bad shape. And so, looked for wisdom, wanted to understand what that was about. Joseph gave it. And they said, well, how are we going to deal with it? Well, let's ask Joseph. He figured out this other stuff. And so he told them, said, in the good years, build extra barns, store up a bunch of stuff, and all that, and you'll be fine for the bad years. And sure enough, it happened exactly that way. And in the bad years, not only did they have enough for them, they had enough to buy everybody else's property. People were starving, and they gave up power and property, and Egypt pretty much took over the region. And so it was left that way. Throughout his life, he was number 2 in command over there. But then after a few years, they forgot why those things. He brought down his family so that they would be out of that place. And God had reasons for doing that, to get them away from the worldly influences. And he got them down there, and he kept them separated for a while. But then it got to where the Egyptians were more and more oppressive, and they enslaved them. And there arose a king, a Pharaoh, over Egypt, who knew not Joseph, forgot why they were there, and now they were afraid of him. Who are all these people? They're going to take over. You can read the last of chapter 1 in Exodus, and it says all that stuff, how they got so afraid that they oppressed them, and it got to the point that they were afraid they were going to overpopulate. And so it got to where if a boy was born, they told the midwives to be sure they died at childbirth. They told the midwives to do that. In fact, it's there in verse 15. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom one was named Shiphrah and the other was named Puah. And he said, when you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew women, see to it, and see them on the birth stools. If it's a son, then you shall kill him. If it's a daughter, they shall live. Wonderfully, the midwives they were kind of rebellious. It's amazing how people that honor God honor life. Right? Who's the way, the truth, and the life? If we're going to be about Christ, we're going to be about life, and so were these. The midwives feared God, and they did as the king. They did not do as the king commanded them, but saved the male children alive. And it's funny when they asked him. The king says, "Why are these boys all living?" And here's what they said: Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and they give birth before the midwives can get to it. That didn't make Pharaoh feel any better. It's almost comical for such a horrible situation that's going on. And since it didn't get any better, the last verse says this. So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born shall be cast into the river, that be the Nile River, and the daughters you shall save alive. What a horrible thing. What a horrible thing. Well, Brother Darrell, how is this about motherhood and moms and all that? We live in a time where people don't know who Joseph was. You would be amazed. I've talked to college graduates, American born, American raised, that didn't know who Noah was, didn't know who Moses was. We live in a culture, we're in the Bible Belt, we think that people know these things, but you would be amazed how many people don't know. I can tell you, and I'm going to go off a little bit here, I'm going to go into American history. American history is strange, and people think that it's always been like we've been living in. But whenever American history got started, it was really weird because the rest of the world for thousands of years had a basic system of government. The rulers and the people. What's missing? There's nothing in the middle. It was the rulers and the people. Whether you were a dictator like Nebuchadnezzar was, or whether you were in England in the Robin Hood days. None of y'all remember, no, Lucky's not in here. Somebody might remember some of those days. But back in those days, it was called the feudal system. In the feudal system, you had castles, and you had the lords that lived in the castles. Not our lord, but that was the title of the boss. And they were over a certain amount of land. And in Europe, everybody who lived on that land, called serfs, belonged to that land. So the Lord was literally their master. And all you had was the rich and the very poor. The middle class was almost not there. Well, I don't know if y'all know this, but people would rather be rich than poor. Have y'all heard that before? And so pretty much where this system, and it had been there forever, there was always somebody trying to knock the head man off the block. Kind of king of the mountain. Did any of y'all play that when you were little? It's probably not politically correct now, but they still play it in a lot of countries. Whoever's at the top, go for them and knock them off the top. And so this system, it wasn't called slavery, but it absolutely was. When they got in the war, they said, serfs up, let's go get them. They get all their slaves to go after the other group and all their slaves. And that's how that worked. Do you have a stable country when it's like that? No. It's not stable at all because someone is always trying to do what? Overtake it. And they're the minority. The rich are the minority. And so it was like that. And sadly, the religious organizations at the time would back the lords, the heads of these places. And that was pretty much European culture. If it wasn't out-and-out dictatorship in some of the other ones, that was pretty much European culture. And so that was it. And so a bunch of them found out they couldn't worship the way they wanted to, and so they found out there was some more land across the water. Y'all probably heard of them, the Pilgrims. They were the separatists, the Puritans. They were coming to purify their religion. They couldn't go along with what was going on. These were up in Massachusetts. Had some Baptists came to a town, they named it Providence. This is where the First Baptist Church, you want to know where First Baptist Church is? Well, it was in Providence. Y'all heard of that one before, I'm sure. Right? And then you had, in Pennsylvania, you had the Quakers. That was a name they called them because they said they're so afraid of God they shake all the time, so they called them Quakers. It was actually a put down, but the name stuck, and they didn't mind it because they didn't mind saying we fear God. And you had different ones in Maryland. That was where the Catholics got away from the Protestant side of Europe to go and worship freely. And so pretty much all these colonies were settled by people from Europe who came to get what? Free to be able to worship their God. And something strange happened while they were here. A middle class emerged. It wasn't about they came to find gold. There wasn't any. But they came to find gold. Now, instead, they went to work. Now, how much gold was laying around? Not much. Well, a little bit they got from the Native Americans. But they suddenly became, instead of the slave statute, they moved on up and became middle class. What's middle class? Not dependent necessarily on somebody taking care of it, as the Lord's did, as that they put it in their day. And it continued to grow that way. But what happens whenever you become responsible? You're not having to listen to somebody else tell you what's right and wrong. You can fall under conviction. And what happened during that time? A lot of the old habits came from Europe and all. And so, was it 47 years ago? Y'all remember that speech? That was Abraham Lincoln. He came and he said he got to the point where no longer could the conscience of the nation deal with slavery. It didn't match all the things. It didn't match the Declaration of Independence. It didn't match anything. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. It didn't match. And it had already gotten bad and got to stinking so bad again. You know what, people? We're still not comfortable getting rid of it because it's an institution. That's what my grandpappy did and all that kind of stuff. And so it was so bad, God allowed the Civil War. I say God did because Abraham Lincoln proclaimed it. He said the Civil War was God's judgment on a nation because more people from the North died than the South in the war. About 600,000 to 700,000 people killed. I had a great-great-great-grandfather that was killed. Actually, that was fighting for the North. And his cousin got wounded fighting for the South. It was that kind of a horrible war. And many, only 6 out of 100 Southerners owned slaves. They were the Lord's. Who was the rest of them? They said slaves actually felt sorry for many of them because they were so poor, didn't know where they were going to get their next meal. But it was all set up that way. Anyway, all this happened. And then what started happening was, wait a minute, because all men got the right to vote right after that, black men and white men, right? But who didn't get the right to vote? Women. Didn't come till later, right? And so that they call the United States the melting pot because I don't know if you know it. To blend things together, sometimes it takes a lot of heat. And so the women put some heat on the men, and guess what? That came about. And then more civil rights, other things that didn't line up correctly started going through. A lot of heat, a lot of turmoil and all. And it's continued on that way. Well, when I started teaching history, they taught the full story. The civil rights movement and how it got started. But they got to where now they're only teaching just a little bit with the other, but mostly from the civil rights on. But if you don't know where it came from, you wind up very mad. Why are things still wrong? And yet the evolution, I don't believe in evolution, but the growing of the nation shows it moving further away from the evils that were and to the other side. Now, Brother Dale, why do you bring that up? That's politics. No, it's not. It's history. Okay? But what I want you to see is if you don't know the context of how something got started, you can make bad decisions. You can make horrible decisions. This guy knew not What, this Pharaoh knew not Joseph? He didn't know why the people came, and now he's scared of them. And what's he doing? Killing the babies. Right? He's killing the babies. Well, is God going to stand by and let that go on forever? No, that's not our God. In fact, we know judgment's coming one day to the whole earth, and the only thing going to be left is the church. That's why we're not here protesting this and that. We're here proclaiming Jesus Christ. Amen? We're looking at salvation issues. Anyway, did you know that God used a mom to help that situation? God used a mom. I told you we'd get back to Mother's Day. Y'all wondered where we were going. I'm going to show you why it's important. Whose job is it to tell people the fullest story? Whose job is it? Is it the school's job? I can tell you, as a public school teacher, your hands are tied. Wonderful Christian teachers, but your hands are tied. There are things you can tell and things you're not allowed to tell. Things you could tell last week that you can't tell this week. Laws change, ideas change, different people get into power that forgot how the United States was founded on Christian values. Took them, taken them, still taking them. I don't know about you, I've been Christian a while. There's still some things God's working on me. The Christian values that started are still doing what? Going through their issues in this nation, but hopefully moving more and more to be godly. But something seemed to happen the last 15 or 20 years, and it doesn't seem to be getting more godly in our culture. Have you noticed that? It's not getting more godly. It's getting to where we celebrate evil things, like the killing of babies. Preborn or born now that it has come into play. All this weird stuff is happening. We need some mom's wisdom. There's one of the great philosophers, Aristotle, said, if you give me a child until they're 7 years old, a child until they're 7 years old, I'll show you the man. What was he saying? If I can have a child to 7 and instill the proper values, I know that this one will grow up looking right to those same values. They won't forget who Joseph was. They won't forget how we got here and where we're progressing to, what our goals are. They won't forget those things. So, with that stated, we're going to look at this particular mom. And look what she did. And a man of the house of Levi took a wife, a daughter of Levi. Who did the Levites become? Do you know? The priest. Did you know the Levites are pretty much the only of the tribes of Jacob, the 12 tribes, that are still identifiable? The rest have lost all the records and all that kind of stuff. But their names pretty much carried through. And so they're able to recognize who they are. And the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. She hid him for 3 months. What was the price, you think, of them finding that child in her house? What was she supposed to do with him, according to what we ended up the first chapter on? She's supposed to throw him in the river, right? But for 3 months she kept him. Now, did they have double pane windows back then and air conditioning systems to block? How hard was it to hide a baby for 3 months? How hard would it be to hide a baby for 3 months? Have y'all noticed that sometimes they make noise? Sometimes they smell worse than other things around? You know, there are several things that you can recognize, little telltale signs that a baby's around. Exhausted moms, for example. Or moms that lose all their intellect when they're getting down going, coochie, coochie, coochie. You know, they might be very intelligent people, but suddenly they lose all of that when they're playing with a baby. And almost do that too, right? But that's where she's at. And it says, she saw this beautiful child. And where's the dad? Who's hiding that baby? The mom is. There's something about a mom, and don't get between a mom and her cub. That's a dangerous, dangerous place, right? And so this mom is doing everything she can, but at 3 months, it's getting to where it's going to be hard to hide. And people are going to notice that this is a 3-month-old little boy, and he's supposed to be gone, and he's still here. And it could be death for her and even her whole family, because they're already upset. This lady's name is Jacobed. You find that out in sixth chapter of Exodus, as they give the lineage. But it said, here she is. And so here's what she decided to do. When she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes. You don't see many of those. Have y'all found any at Walmart? A good ark of bulrushes? Target Scott. Upscale for me, but anyway. What is she made a little boat out of some reeds, tied them together, and she was pretty good at it because she dabbed them with asphalt and pitch. Not the kind with rocks in it, but basically put tar on it to make it waterproof. And then she laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. Isn't it odd? What was she trying to protect the baby from happening to the baby? Where'd she go with it? To the river. Isn't that strange? But, you know what? Pharaoh comes and says, you were supposed to throw that baby in the river. There it is. She already got a defense on it. Right, lawyer, she'll be fine. You know, but she did. Let me ask you something. How many of us are afraid of our kids out in the world because of the destructive power of the world? You know, what's happening in the world to so many people? Getting confused and all that kind of stuff. And losing it to the worldly things, the destructive things in the world. And yet, I don't know if you know it, but when they get 18, you got to what? Got to let them go. You know? What did Jacob do? What do you think she was thinking when she put that baby in that little boat in the edge of the river? What do you think she was thinking? You think she was afraid? I think there was fear involved. I think it would be hard not to be afraid. But she knew she couldn't keep him anymore, and she knew what? Since it was bigger than her, who was she going to have to turn it over to? Over to God. So she didn't just send him out saying, I'm done with this kid. She said, God, I've done all I can do. I followed your instructions. We know that she wouldn't keep him without God's doing all that he'd done. I don't believe that she put him in this boat without God giving her that leaning to understand that that's what she was doing. And then she had to do what? She had to let go. She had to let go of that child, she had to do what?
Trust.
She had to trust God. Right? It's one of those things, you've heard this cliche before, but it's a wonderful one. Let go and let God. As long as we got a hold of certain things, then we're stopping God from having full access. How many of us want full access on those that we love? Full access. You know? And so letting go and let God. This mom did that. How much love does it take to let go? You know, we like to hold on to things because it makes us feel more comfortable. Right? Us feeling comfortable is not love. Did you know that? Not loving others. Who's it loving? It's loving yourself. Us feeling comfortable is not the definition of love. Love is doing what's best. Right? What's best for the one you say that you love. And what's very best is put them in whose hands? God's. If he instructs you to do something, go get you some good bulrushes and some tar and make you a boat. If he tells you to, right? If he tells you to help them this way, if he tells you don't help them this way, whatever he tells you, he's correct. What's it going to take for you to say, yes, God, I'll do it that way? Trust, obedience. God says if you love him, you'll do that. But how many of us would rather feel comfortable than doing what God asked us to do? It's a hard thing to break, isn't it? Kind of used to that. And for a mom, you know, it was excruciating to put her baby down and let him go. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done with him. We know that that's Miriam. This mom, pretty special mom, she wound up with 3 prophets as children. 3 prophets as children. Miriam was a prophet, right? Y'all remember his brother? Aaron, right? And then this, we know this baby's name is Moses. And so this is a pretty special mom. You don't hear her say hardly anything in here, just a few things. You see by her actions who she is. You see that she's going against the king, the most powerful king in the world at the time, right? For her child. What happened? Well, then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river. And her maidens walked alongside the riverside, and she saw the ark among the reeds, and she sent her maid to get it. Uh-oh. Who showed up at the river? Daddy's little girl. Does God know how Daddy's little girls are? Most Daddy's little girls have one of these things. They can do some things with that. If you don't believe me, go look at Aaron and Ava. Right? They play it in the, Alex. Got the wrong cousin. But Alex and Ava, and then you see them playing, and she's got him. He's wrapped. Right? She's fussing at him. How old is she? Isn't it amazing at 3 months old that they know what to do with dads? Let's see. If you can find Lucky, you find he's pretty wrapped up too in a little bitty one back there, and so on and so forth. How it goes. And so, does God know how to handle this situation to get what's best for His agenda? I'll tell you something else about this one. She's going to raise this child as her own, and yet it's not her child. Isn't that interesting? Can you be a mom and never have given childbirth? Absolutely. Praise God. Amen. What makes a mom is not the biological effects. It's that loving gift that God has given through moms. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept, and she had compassion and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then the sister shows up and says to the Pharaoh's daughter, said, hey, you know what? I could get somebody to come and be sure the milk's available for that child. Would you like that? And Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go. And the girl went and called who? Who's the best nursemaid they could find for that little baby. It's amazing how they took to each other, like they'd known each other all their lives. Right? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I'll give you wages. So here's a slave now getting what? Paid. What happens when you turn things over to God? I'm not talking about saying, here, God. I'm talking about, God, how do you want me to walk through this situation? How do I do that? And then when you come up against that crisis of belief, when He says, do it this way, and you say, oh, that don't make sense. But you know it's of God. You know it's of God. What can God do then? So much more than you can think or ask. All she was looking for was what? The baby wouldn't be killed. And now where are they? She's got her child. She's getting paid as a slave. She has connections to the highest earthly power in the land. All these things are happening because she trusted God. As the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. Remember what we said? I can have a child, as Aristotle said, till they're 7. I can show you the man. How long did she get to have an influence on this child? I don't know, probably around 5 or 6 years old. Probably about that time would be weaning time for those kids back in that day. So she had him for the foundations of who he was going to be. And Brother Darrell, how do you know that she had an effect on that? If only we had a rest of the story. Right? Paul Harvey won. But if you did turn over to the book of Hebrews, we can read a little bit about what happened with this child. Verse 23 in chapter 11, this is in the Hall of Fame of the faithful. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child. And they were not afraid of the king's command. When it says not afraid, it didn't mean that it didn't bother them. It meant that the fear that they had of losing that child was bigger than the fear of the king. Does that make sense? That didn't influence them to go and do it the king's way. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Give us a child till he's 7, and I'll show you the man. Who had an influence on this child? Jacob did, his mom. Didn't mean that he didn't love the other lady. Didn't mean all that kind of stuff. Right? If it hadn't been for the other lady, he wouldn't have been alive. Of course, God set that up. But she had all that effect. We get kind of excited about Vacation Bible School here. Why? You say, Brother Dowd, that one's too young to know, and this one and that. Give us a child till they're 7, and we can show you the man. Because whose job is it to say, this is what got us here? What got you to church this morning? Well, I can go over there, and Brother Darrell, he talks in such a way I can really relax and rest. Yeah, is that it? No. There's going to be donuts. Going to be nice people. All that kind of stuff. Is that what brought you? No, I submit to you it's because you found a love for Christ. And you've been fighting the battle between self and doing it God's way. And you've finally come to realize, as most of us are learning, His way is always better. Why do I keep settling for less? And so you keep coming. And then we have the wonderful opportunity to be an influence on not just children and not just each other, but all that God would send. And that's an avenue that God's given us. Who is telling our kids about Jesus now? Is it coming from the schools? I can tell you, their hands are tied. They're forced many times to tell kids about stuff we would not want to be talking about in our house. Amen? And it's the law. And I know teachers still tell and try to witness and show and all that kind of stuff because they're more afraid of what happens to these kids than they are of the government in its sake. Has our government forgot who Joseph is? What brought us here to find and start following paths of independence, and I don't mean independence from other nations, I mean independence of we're not dependent on the government to have to do everything like children are independent. But we're going to do what God shows us to do. By the way, I am very dependent on God. I want to be more dependent on God. I wish I did everything His way. I am not embarrassed to say I want to be dependent on my God. But I don't want someone else get between me and my God. And I don't want my kids so confused by what the world is doing who knows not who Joseph or who God's provisions are that they don't hear about it. And I want my kids raised by a godly mom. There's another quote that goes like this: the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Where did they come up with that quote? It comes from about 1865 in Poland. Passed on by other famous speakers. What are they saying? Well, just like Jacob and Moses, where did he get his nurturing and understanding of what life is? A precious mom who passed on that wisdom. Let me ask you something. Does the world say, women, you know, you didn't have rights until the 1920s to vote, and now they're trying to keep you down and keep you at home and have those kids. You don't need those kids. Throw them in the river so that you can reach a fulfillment of life. Have you heard that before? And we'll celebrate. Seen that on the news. What happens to our little ones when they don't have someone who reminds them where we came from, where we're going? Not as Americans, but as children of God. What happens when we miss things? Church, do we need to be praying for godly women? Do we need to be celebrating godly women? Or do we just need to celebrate those who dress in the latest fashions and have reached a certain level in their position at work or what have you? No problem with ladies working and all that other kind of stuff. I just hate the fact that they say you can't have God's best. You can't have God's best and still do it God's way. You've got to do it the way we say. Play a different game. Are we a society that doesn't know anymore what's right anymore? By faith, Moses, when he became of age, says, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not playing this game. I'm not doing it the worldly way. I'm going to do it with what I understand about who my God is, that I learned from his, in this case, his natural mother. Choosing rather to suffer the affliction of the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. I'm a wayfaring stranger. Why? Why don't we just settle in and say, this is the best that there is. Let me get all I can while I'm here. Why are we wayfaring, moving, strangers to it? Because we know that anything we get here is what? Temporary. Do we want our kids chasing temporary pleasures and face eternal judgment? Or do we want our kids saying, you know what, I'm gonna do things that help more people become rescued and less people be in hell? Who's going to teach them that? Who gets first shot? Moms. Moms get first shot, don't they? They get that wonderful nurturing opportunity. First shot. Says Moses esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of heaven. And he looked towards that reward. Did Moses know Jesus? Was Jesus born when Moses was there? No, but Jesus was. Amen? And he was the provision so that by faith, Moses would be saved. By faith. By faith, he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who's invisible. He endured as seeing him who's invisible. What would make a child believe in God that they can't see? Well, listen, the world can draw up every animation in the world and say, this is real. What would make a child, when they can see all those kind of, the cartoons and all that kind of stuff that's out there, they can make any fantasy look real, and we're telling them about an invisible God. We're talking about the invisible God. What would make them believe in the invisible God? They would have to absolutely trust the person telling them. Amen? In most cases, who do they learn to trust first? Who do they learn to trust first? Mom said it. Right? What a privilege. What a privilege. What does the world say? No, that's holding you back. If we broke away from all the other things that we thought, well, let's just keep breaking away from stuff and it'll get better and better. There's certain things that need to be broken. Slavery needs to be broken. Treating women as chattel, as property, need to be broken. There was actually laws in around 1999 that says you couldn't beat your wife with a stick bigger than your finger. Laws on the books need to be broken. Not just the law, but the sticks, right? Those things need to be gone. But when we get down to what now we've decided we're oppressed because women have to have babies. Don't have to. But they say that's oppression. Right? And so we've gone so far beyond, in that sense, that what's happening to our kids? I saw a number of how many abortions have been since Roe v. Wade. It's in like 3 or 4 million. I saw for the world, it was something big and killed. It's scary. You say, well, Brother Darrell, in this world, maybe that's a better thing than to go out and face the world. Let me ask you something. Did Jochebed trust her child into the river that was killing all the others? Yeah, because who was protecting that child? When he asked the church to multiply and be fruitful, why did he do that? We're called to be what to the world? Salt and light. Salt and light. Instead, who's multiplying? The worldly people or the church people? It's scary what's out there. Moms, thank you for what you wonderfully endeavored to do. By the way, if you love somebody, you're going to hurt, aren't you? How many of y'all noticed that? The more you love, the more you hurt. You put your feelings out there and all that kind of stuff. But where would we be without somebody say, child, this is right, this is wrong. This is God, this is temporary. Heaven is eternal, and so is hell. Who are they going to believe? They need somebody who they can trust ever since birth. Does that let dads off the hook? Not a bit, not a bit. Amen. So we're honoring our God today by honoring moms. Who set that up? Who set that system up? Who did that? God did. Says actually Jesus did. It said without him nothing was created. Motherhood was created by Jesus. The action hand of God on the earth. Right? Does he mess up? Moms, you're not a mistake. Mom, your wonderful role in producing children is not a mistake. Or did God just really mess up? If you have a hard time with that question, then we got to go back to the beginning again. Amen? Does God mess up? No. And I thank God for what he's done. Ladies, thank you. Let's pray. Heavenly